What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here as we get ready to rock into another episode. Big win for Georgia this weekend over Kentucky. We've been waiting on a start like that, hadn't we? It's been far too long since Georgia came out onto the field and immediately showed you the team that they are and proved to you why they're the number one team in the country yet again this week. The AP poll came out earlier today, and I know that the AP poll doesn't necessarily matter, but right now it is what we have to judge each team based off of that ranking. That's the only ranking system that truly matters. There is a coaches poll out there. It doesn't necessarily vary too far from what the AP poll ranks as. Last week I changed it up a little bit in my top five, but this week I changed it back. A lot of that's because Texas lost this weekend, which we'll get to later on in the week. But this is my top five. My top five after this weekend. Georgia back on top. Looked really good, obviously, in this game. Michigan in second, FSU at third, Ohio State fourth, Penn State fifth. Penn State slowly but surely kind of working their way up in the rankings here. The only reason I don't have Michigan, I'm not willing to put Michigan one. Georgia has proven, like I said right there off the start, they're the number one team in the country, and rightfully so. Michigan has looked good at times that they're very consistent. I'll give them that, but I don't know. I'm still waiting on them to truly have to play somebody to see what happens with that. FSU continues to look good, especially offensively. Ohio State, a lot of people I think are going to say Ohio State is better than FSU, and the AP poll also says that. I don't know that win over Notre Dame gets diminished a little bit this weekend, which we're going to talk about again later on in this episode. But Penn State slowly but surely kind of working their way up these rankings as things have gone out through the season, and they continue to do that this week as well. I don't know. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with them. Here's what the AP poll looks like right now. Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, like I said there off the top. Where I have FSU at third, they have Ohio State, but they do have FSU at fourth, and they put Oklahoma all the way up to fifth after beating the third-ranked Texas Longhorns. Then they've got Penn State at 6, Washington at 7, Oregon at 8, Texas falls down to 9, USC falling down to 10 after that 3-overtime game last night. Again, we're going to talk about all these big games from last night. Alabama staying steady there at 11, North Carolina 12, Ole Miss 13, Louisville jumps from 25th all the way up to 14th, Oregon State 15, Utah at 16, Duke at 17, UCLA after a big win up to 18, Tennessee at 19, Wazoo down to 19. Okay, why there's two 19s? I guess they must have had like the same pointing. So it's either Tennessee or Wazoo, 19 and 20. Notre Dame, 21st, LSU, 22nd, that's actually Kansas at 23rd, Kentucky only falling down to 24th, and then Miami, 25 after, my goodness, a wild weekend. Some great games going on this weekend and some wild finishes. In the end, it was, again, college football's back. So exciting when we're halfway through the season and we have big games that are going on like this, as opposed to blowouts and as opposed to games that are extremely boring. This was a good weekend. This was a fun weekend of college football, and I was really excited to be able to check it all out. If you guys don't mind, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at DogTalk20. Same thing on Instagram there, if you guys don't mind. And then if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up, give us a like, leave a comment if you guys want to. Wherever you guys are listening on podcasts, make sure that you give us that 5-star rating. We'd greatly appreciate it. Let's get right into the facts of the game. Georgia, big winners, 51-13 in this game over Kentucky. At the time, a 20th ranked Kentucky team who came in here undefeated. Missouri had a game earlier in the day against LSU. The only three teams remaining undefeated in the SEC was Missouri, Kentucky, and Georgia. And after Missouri falls to LSU, there were only two left, and whoever the winner of this game last night was going to be the remaining team in the SEC to be undefeated. Georgia prevails in that. Georgia is now the only team that is undefeated in the SEC, not in SEC play, but in the SEC in general and overall. play, and that's exciting, man. That's such a fun thing to really get to represent the conference right now, and to be sitting at the top of the poll as well and doing that is really awesome. Georgia come into this game, every week we've been saying, when is Georgia going to show up? When is Georgia going to start fast? When is this going to happen? And when are things really going to start clicking to where, we don't have this argument in the first half of, is Georgia really the number one team? Georgia doesn't look like it. Absolutely zero questions should be raised at the end of Saturday night and Sunday morning as to who the top team in the country is. You had a 20th ranked undefeated Kentucky team who came in here ready, what they thought at least, ready to try to put up a fight. Every week, or not every week, every year, this matchup right here, for whatever reason, has been a bit of a slobber knocker. It has been one a couple of years ago. It was raining, very close game. And then we had the same year where Kentucky was undefeated and the same thing happened. They came to town and Georgia was handling business. And then late in that game, it got much closer than we thought it would. Last year, this game even going to Lexington, it was a close game in that one. Every year we seem to play pretty close against Kentucky. I think the last time I really remember seeing Georgia kind of handle Kentucky may have been that 2017 season when Georgia really throttled everybody. Should have won the national championship that year, but I digress. We move on. But this was a game where Georgia came in, had the game plan ready. They had Kentucky's number in all facets. Georgia won this game in all facets of it was not just an offensive blowout. It was not just a defensive blowout. It was everything. Even the kicker absolutely dominating in this game. So awesome to see for Georgia. And it was also fun to watch Georgia do this, because then when you looked at social media, you didn't have the complainers. You didn't have those guys saying, oh, Georgia, here we go again. It was, hey, look, there's the Georgia team we've been waiting on. And the thing that I love is, you look back last week against Auburn, Kirby has told you this, it's hard to win there, especially when you're having to play with a beat-up team. We've been injured. We're slowly but surely getting healthy at a really good time. And you're at home. A game like this at home is much, much simpler. You get to open that playbook up more because it's not as loud of an environment like it was last week. You really get to hand the ball to your quarterback and let him make the plays. And my goodness, Carson Beck absolutely made some plays in this game, and it was awesome. Very, very awesome. I've got some breakdowns from the first half to the second half that we're going to get into. But looking at a note that I had come up earlier today, Carson Beck now sits fourth among quarterbacks in passing stats. This is not the SEC. Last week, or really previewing, we were thinking and reading that Carson was second in the SEC as far as passing yards go, right behind Jaden Daniels. Well, now he is fourth in the country in his passing stats, right behind Jaden Daniels again. But then I think Penix Jr. over there. Where's Penix? Where is he? Washington. And then you have Shedeur Sanders at Colorado ahead of him, and not very much. Really, Carson right now, 144 passes, 196 completions. That's right at 74%. Almost 1,900 yards. He's at 1,886 yards on the season. He's lighting it up. This game helped a lot. Because he was perfect. The first quarter, I think the dude's like 12 for 12. Absolutely lighting it up. Accurate with his passes. He's looking downfield. Yes, he has these short dink and dunk plays here and there that go for larger yards, but he's also looking downfield and he's connecting. Him and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint really in the first half got things going for Georgia offensively. And then defensively, really stifling Kentucky's offense as well. I think Kentucky kind of came into this game with a game plan of, all right, well, if we can get on top of these guys and really attack, we stand a really good chance if they start slow to be able to get on top of them and hopefully hold them down. That didn't happen. Georgia was the one who started fast. We talked about time of possession coming into this. Is this part of it? Is third downs? What is it exactly that Georgia's missing? And in this game, Georgia got the kickoff. And I think in some of the games past, Georgia has not. And when we haven't scored off of that first possession. Well, Georgia did that in this game. Get the kickoff, drive right down and score. And then really every possession, Georgia didn't punt the ball until the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter. And, that tells you just about all you need to know, because Georgia just didn't have those stalled drives. We didn't have missed field goals, none of that. Everything was clicking, and it was awesome to see. Like I said, it was also awesome just to look over and see that nobody's complaining on social media. But into some of the injury updates. Obviously, we got Kendall back. He was a big part of this game. Broderick's still out. Marius Mims still going to be out for a little while. Javon Bullard coming back. My goodness, that's huge. Lab McConkey, even though we didn't see him a ton in this game, it was still huge to have him back, because even if he's not necessarily making big plays, he still has eyes on him, because he's a great wideout. I think it was Xavier Truss. Is that who went out early in the game for the O-line? I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of blanking on exactly who it was that we had go down. I can't recall if he even came back into the game. But that's really the main injuries that I saw kind of in this game, and we're going to see how the week goes, and hopefully, like I said, we're getting healthy. We're getting healthy at a really good time too, which means a lot, and I'm really excited about that. So let's kind of get into things now. Georgia, again, a 51-13 final in this game. Absolutely offensive explosion in this game. Let me get my points up here on YouTube. Again, if you guys are watching, make sure you go over and tune into that. Here's what we got offensively. 608 total yards for Georgia in this game. 608. You heard me right if you're listening. 608 total yards in this football game. 6 touchdowns, only one blemish on the night by Carson Beck. And he did. He overthrew that one and just kind of tried to make a bigger play than he could have. I think a lot of that you have to credit to him getting comfortable and kind of getting in a groove and then just letting one soar on him. And it ended up costing us. That was one of the sole touchdowns that Kentucky had in this game. Actually, it was the sole touchdown. You throw the interception. They drove down and made points out of it. And that is one thing that was one of the keys that we'll get to in a minute. Don't want to turn the ball over in this game. That was a prime example. Most every team that we've played, when we've turned the ball over, they turn that turnover into points. And luckily in this one, again, Georgia was already up handedly and kind of took care of business in this one. We throw the ball 435 total yards in this game, 5 touchdowns through the air, that 1 interception, and rushed the ball 173 yards with 1 touchdown. In the first half of this game, unreal. Georgia was up 34-7 in this game. Kicking it on first downs, the third downs. This was another marker that we've just got to continue to do good at and be improved at. 3 for 5 on third downs for Georgia, holding them to 2 for 7. That's where I kind of get this sound in. Oop, wrong sound. It's those third down dogs, because the Dogs are getting off the field on third down as a defense, and offensively we're staying on the field and we're continuing our drives, which is huge. That's a big part to me that I'm starting to look at and see that the numbers are really telling you. Being on the field and converting those third downs, whether it's long, short, doesn't matter, but staying on the field, sustaining a drive, getting down the field, and being able to make points out of it. Especially now that we're getting the kicking game kind of back in gear where we've seen it in years past for Georgia. So helpful, such a helpful thing to do, because if you're not extending drives. And again, Georgia did not punt in this game until late in this football game. So even though you're 3 for 5 on the third downs, again, your kicker was a lead in this game. Through the first half, Georgia already had 385 yards. 307 of that came through the air. So that means actually it was 77 yards of that was on the ground. We were averaging 11.8 yards per play or per pass in the first half, 6.4 on the ground. Penalties started to kind of become a little bit of an issue in this game. Not necessarily an issue for Georgia, but it definitely was for Kentucky. Georgia, through the first half, Georgia had 4 penalties, 36 yards, to Kentucky's 5 penalties for 60 yards. And the wild thing about it is in the second half, Kentucky didn't get another penalty. At least my stats show that they didn't get another one. I thought they had a few more in that second half, but what this shows is they didn't. I'm not 100% sure on that. I should probably go back and double check it, but what I saw showed that they didn't. But those first half penalties were killers for Kentucky. There were a couple of times that they were making some pretty egregious plays where hitting guys late. One guy jumps on one of our linemen's back like he's laying on the ground. I swear one time it looked like they were trying to poke Brock Bowers' eyes out. I mean, you would see a lineman that he wouldn't get flagged for this, but like when Dejon Edwards was running, you'd see a lineman lay down on him, and he just kind of put all his weight on him and just sit there for a second, trying not to let him up. And you could tell a little by little, you could tell it was kind of getting on Georgia's nerves. I saw a couple times Dejon even kind of threw an elbow like, dude, get off me, let me up. And I know this is kind of fussing about something small, but then listening after the game, listening to Kirby Smart kind of talk about that and saying, he knew that coming into this game that Kentucky was going to do everything they could to get you rattled and get in your head. And he made sure before the game, this is how great Kirby Smart is and how smart he is to have that forethought to think about something like this and a big physical matchup that you're about to have, was to be able to say, hey, these guys are going to come in here and they're going to try to get in your head. You can't let them. You can't let them. If they want to talk, let them talk. You don't talk back. If they want to fight, let them fight. You don't fight back. Get out of the way. And Georgia did a really, really good job of that. He even said that they were extremely disciplined in this game, and that's what it took to not get those penalties in the first half. And Kentucky did, and Georgia got on top of them, and with those penalties as well, continuing drives, extending those drives as well, some of that helped. So I did think that was kind of strange, not really strange, but just kind of tough to see, really. Kentucky really, to me, kind of playing dirty. I don't really like watching some of that. Part of that is because we got that guys that are beat up already. I really don't want to see somebody get hurt over a stupid play that another team could have completely avoided doing just to try to hurt you. But that's just some of my griping anyway. In the first half, Carson Beck, 21 for 26, 307 yards. Again, 3 touchdowns, averaging almost 12 yards passed. Dejon Edwards had 5 carries, 39 yards, 4 reception, and 40 yards. So he all-purpose yards. Had almost 80 yards there. Kendall Milton, 4 carries, 23 yards, and a touchdown. Again, glad to have him back. When you have multiple backs that are in the game like that, Dylan Bell still carried the rock a little bit for us, but having Dejon Edwards, who is shifty, and man, he's so great at making that first guy miss, and then being able to have the fresh legs of Kendall Milton come back in there too, who has that shiftiness, but is also a bull nose who will run right in the middle up against anyone and not care about it. It's great to have that verse of both backs being back in the backfield too. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, huge first half in this game, 4 reception, 99 yards and a touchdown. Brock Bowers, 5 for 97 yards. Ra had 3 touches, 32 yards. That one big touchdown right there just does get a toe tap down. It's beautiful to see that. Such a great pass. Kind of reminded me of Terry Godwin against Notre Dame with the lean back catch that he had as well. Oscar Depp, 2 receptions, 12 touchdowns, also had a touchdown, or 12 yards, and a touchdown in this game as well. Such a big matchup. Again, we wondered, is Kentucky's defense really going to be able to fight you in this game? And it didn't matter. In the end, again, Georgia 608 total yards. And this is how those divide up by the end of the game. Georgia had 33 first downs, 12 for Kentucky, 5 for 11 on third downs. This was one thing that didn't really improve as the game went on, but it's kind of crazy to look and see Georgia went 5 for 11, so you're not quite at that 50% mark, but Georgia wasn't punting the ball. Only went for it on fourth down one time in this. Did not punt the football in this game. So kind of curious exactly how that worked out. But again, 5 for 11. If they extend a couple of drives because of penalties, so be it. You go for it on fourth one time, you get it, so be it. And then you got a couple of field goals that are good in this game as well. And then the one punt later on in the fourth quarter too. So that's kind of how that lines up. Luckily, in the end, did not end up hurting us. But Kentucky, on the other hand, 2 for 11. So they only got the 2 conversions on third down. That happened in the first half of this game. 608 yards. This is the wild one. 183 total yards. 183 is all that Kentucky got in this football game. Most all of it coming through the air as well. Here's something to kind of blow your mind. 50 is what I'm looking at. Basically, 50 yards is what Kentucky got in the second half of this game. Through the air, Georgia had 435 total yards. You see it on the screen there if you're watching. 5 of those touchdowns. 128 yards through the air is what Kentucky had in this game. So they had about 26 more yards through the air in the second half of this game. Georgia was averaging 10.4. Thought I put it up there, but it didn't. 10.4 yards per pass in this one. They were averaging 4.9. We rushed the ball 173 yards with a touchdown there. They rushed it 55 yards. That was it. We talked about it coming into this game. Cannot let Kentucky run on you the way that Auburn did in the week past. Did a great job at that. And that's because, like we said coming into it, most of the time, who is not going to do something against Georgia's defense 2 weeks in a row? It's just not going to happen. You're not going to have a team in Auburn who's going to put up a lot of rushing numbers against you, and then Georgia turn around and do that same thing in the next week. It just doesn't happen. Georgia, again, we talked about this last week. not only do they adjust in game, but they definitely adjust between games from one game to the next to keep that from happening again. But Georgia averaged 5.6 yards on the ground. They averaged 2.3. Penalties in the end, 6 for 59 yards against Georgia. And again, 5 for 60 is what I keep showing for Kentucky. Georgia with the one turnover. Kentucky did not turn the ball over in this game, which was impressive. But time of possession was definitely leaned towards Georgia the entire game. They had about a 5-minute advantage in the first half, and in the end had a huge advantage, holding the ball for 37 and a half minutes compared to 22 and a half for Kentucky. So this was great, just such a good game. It's so fun when you get to watch Georgia truly do what you expect Georgia to do week in and week out, even though, we didn't necessarily start that way, but we ended that way. And Carson Beck was a huge part of that. Again, 28 for 35, 389 total yards for him, averaging right at 11.1 per play, 4 touchdowns in the end and 1 touchdown. Brock Bowers goes 7 receptions by the end of this one, 132 yards, 1 touchdown. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint did not get another touch in the second half, but still ends the game, 4 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Brock Vandagriff, he also comes in and gets a touchdown in this one, 5 for 7 on the night, 46 yards, 6.6 was his average, had that touchdown. Also, 2 in an Andrew Paul later on in that fourth quarter, and also went for it on 4th down right there at the end of the game, which was kind of fun. Not that we were kind of trying to get the game, out of hand. I don't think we were necessarily trying to just punch it up against them, but at the same thing, I think it was just, hey, let's put this game away. Let's be done with this. Let's go for it on 4th. See what our team can do, and they did a great job at that. Dejon Edwards, 9 carries, 54 yards, he was averaging 6 yards a carry, 6 receptions, 51 yards. Kendall had 8 carries, 47 yards, that 1 touchdown. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, we talked about that. Ra also ends the night, 5 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. You could not ask for a better football game out of the University of Georgia than what they got at the halfway point of this season. Georgia, 6-0, 51-13 win over a ranked undefeated team. You can't ask for better, especially in SEC football play. Everything was clicking. Even your kicker in this game goes 3 for 3 with a long of 42, has 6 extra points. He accounted for 15 points all by himself. Such a great game for Georgia's offense, but even defensively in this game, Georgia ends up with 3 sacks on the night, 4 tackles for loss, 5 pass deflections. Malachi Starks leads things off for us, 5 total tackles, 4 solo. Jamon Dumas-Johnson also popping this one, 4 total tackles, 3 of those solo, a sack and a half for himself. Kamari Lassiter, 4 of those, 2 solo tackles, half a sack, and then also had 2 pass deflections in this game as well. So the defense rocking and rolling, kicking on all cylinders, keeping Kentucky from scoring much in this game. Even late into the game, it didn't matter. Late into the game, even when we started getting second and third string guys in offensively and defense, it didn't matter. Georgia kept going. I almost joked around, and in my top 5 this week, I almost put Georgia 1 and Georgia's second string, but I'm not going to do that. I wasn't going to be that rude to our guys there anyway. So let's look at the keys to the game that we did have coming into this one. Offensively, we wanted to make sure that we protected the ball. Did pretty good at this. Again, Carson Beck got a little bit relaxed in that first half and ends up throwing the interception. But I mean, he knew it as soon as he did it, sailed on him just a little bit. Wasn't the end of the world. But in the end, it didn't hurt us. But that's the only blemish on the night as far as protecting the ball. Mainly my part of this, not necessarily just from his, but was mainly for running, fumbling the ball. Did not want to see that. We did good in this game. Didn't have that happen. I did see one thing special teams-wise. Kirby was really getting after Mekhi Muse because a couple of those punts, he really felt like he should have caught the ball and kept Georgia in a better field position than what we ended up in by letting a punt go. So I saw a couple times you got a little bit of that rage, Kirby, where he was like, all right, you got to catch this ball. There's no reason we should be taking the ball at the 4-yard line. If you catch it on the 12, that's better than being on the 4. But protecting the ball, we still did that great. Beck had a great accuracy. Again, he opens the game like 12 for 12, over 145 yards and a few touchdowns very quickly in this game. And then we got to keep winning on thirds. In the first half, we did good. Second half, not as much, but we're still right there at that 50% mark on the night. So in that. But offensively, keys to the game, worked out great. Defensively, got to stop the run. Great job. killed that, pressured the quarterback, got a few sacks in this game, making them one-dimensional. I think they were zero-dimensional. I mean, they really got to a point where they couldn't throw the ball. And I will say there were a couple of times where they did have a guy open, and Devin Leary couldn't hit him. And some of that I think is because we pressured the quarterback, but also we were making them one-dimensional, not allowing them to run. And when that happens, all you can do is throw, and if you're not accurate, you're getting your tail whipped. Hello, 51-13 final in the end. So the keys to the game, I think they worked out pretty good, and Georgia looked good in the end of this one. Let me see if I can get my screen to pull back up here. But I think Georgia did really good in this game. I think you guys do too. My score prediction on it was this, 37-17. Didn't hit, but we'll take it either way. I was still excited to see what Georgia could do in this game and was proud of them nonetheless. That's what I got on the review. I know it's kind of a quick, it's really not quick. That's 25 minutes of a review in the game. But what more can I say? How about them Dawgs? 6-0. Absolutely throttling a team. You got Vandy coming up this week. Now, that's not a reason to head to Vandy and just sleepwalk through it. That's the one thing I don't want to happen. I don't want Georgia to just go, yes, Vandy. We're headed to Vandy. We're going to be fine. And then all of a sudden it's 21-17 in the fourth quarter at Vandy. That's not what I want to see. I hope Georgia can continue this. Like I said, I think Georgia's getting healthy at a good time. I think Carson Beck is getting very, very comfortable in the pocket. I think everything's starting to click at a really good time. Offensive line, if we can stay healthy, they're starting to do a much better job at protecting Beck back there, opening up those holes for the running backs that are getting loose and getting better as the season goes along, and healthy again in that same regard. And defense, we're really starting to step up and make big plays as well. So that's the review on it. Let's look at some of the other games that are going on around the country, because we had some other big ones as well. Some of the other big ones, let's see. You have Virginia Tech, Florida State. FSU took care of business in that one, 39-17. From my understanding, a good friend of mine that was at that game, man, referees were absolutely killing FSU in this one, but they still pulled away from Virginia Tech. Oregon State at Cal, 52-40. Close one. Not really. 12 points. This was a big one. Notre Dame and Louisville, a game that I thought Notre Dame would take care of business handedly. Thought that Notre Dame has kind of turned things around to where they get in these big games and they take care of business. I mean, they looked good against Ohio State, and a team that the AP poll has sitting in third place right now. That game comes down to the wire, and Ohio State pulls it out. But they fall to an undefeated Louisville, and maybe Louisville is going to be a team to watch in the ACC as they continue that undefeated streak, moving all the way from 25th all the way up to 14th. So maybe that's something to kind of look at. Maybe that team's actually a lot better than people anticipated coming into this season, and they're starting to show that now against a really good, what I thought was a really good Notre Dame team. Georgia Tech upsetting Miami in Miami, 23-20. How they didn't fall out of the top 25, I really don't know, because Georgia Tech lost to Bowling Green last week, and then Miami, it was an ugly win, but had this game in the bag. All they had to do was put their knee on the ground, and they didn't. They fumbled the ball, and 2 plays later, Georgia Tech's in the end zone for a miracle win, but it's a win nonetheless, 23-20, upsetting Miami. What are you doing? What are you doing? Put your knee on the ground. That was nuts. Michigan handles Minnesota 52-10. Arkansas, Ole Miss in a game that, again, I really didn't want to pick this one because it's, for whatever reason, this is a game that always comes down to the wire, and it did again, 27-20. Ole Miss does win it at home. LSU on the road to undefeated Missouri. Can they stay undefeated? And they don't. LSU ends up beating them 49-39. Really good football game, though. Missouri kind of shot themselves in the foot a couple of times in this game, and LSU showed that they're not going to give up fighting. Offensively, I will say this. LSU has a really good offense, but does not have a good defense. They gave up a ton against Ole Miss, and they gave up a lot against Missouri in this one, which granted Missouri a good team, but I thought Missouri defensively would have been able to slow LSU more than they did. Then North Carolina throttles Syracuse 40-7, a team in Syracuse who was looking really good, undefeated against Clemson last week, just barely does lose to Clemson last week, and then get throttled by North Carolina. I really do think North Carolina is going to be a team to watch as we move forward through the season. Also a team who could potentially fight against that FSU team for the ACC championship as we move forward. Maryland and Ohio State, this was a tight game. Maryland actually had the lead in this one early and tied at the half. I think it was tied 17-17 at the half before late in the game Ohio State starts to pull away. Makes it look like a lot better game. In the end, 37-17, Ohio State wins. But it was very, very close early on. That's why I have FSU over Ohio State in my ranking at least. And then the Red River rivalry, complete tongue twister. The team, again, Oklahoma. Maybe Brent Venables is starting to turn things around there for Oklahoma after leaving Clemson. Maybe he took all that Clemson juju that there was and took it with him from Clemson to Ohio or to Oklahoma. Oklahoma beats Texas in this one, a game that last year you wouldn't have said that because Oklahoma gets throttled 49-0. And then all of a sudden they come back this year and beat the number 3 team in the country 34-30 late in this game, back and forth. It's as great of a rivalry game as you could watch for a midseason game. This is one it's hard to believe that they don't play this game at the end of November when all rivalry games are played right there around Thanksgiving because it's that big of a rivalry. So that's one thing I am excited to see next year is both of these teams coming to the SEC. You know, we thought Oklahoma was starting to slide down. We thought Texas might not be all that great by the time they get here. And lo and behold, they're both undefeated halfway through the season the year before they come to the SEC. So they're bringing a lot of good football into the SEC next year. But in the end, again, Oklahoma ends up winning that one 34-30. USC and Arizona, I pray for you guys if you stayed up all night long to watch that one. It took USC to 3 overtimes to be able to win this game, 43-41 over Arizona. But I'm going to tell you something. I wondered, why is it USC is undefeated, but they continue to slide down the rankings? Why is it that USC has the top quarterback and everybody thinks he's going to win the Heisman again in Caleb Williams, but continues to slide down the rankings? And this is why. They have a good offense. They have a good, potent offense and can score on you, but they can't stop you from scoring. And they start early in the season. Early, I think they were ranked like 5th, and they keep winning, but they keep falling. They're all the way down to 10th in the AP poll right now, and that's because of this. You know, you have a game where you go to 3 overtimes against Arizona. They got a much, much tougher matchup coming up this weekend. We're going to see what makes it or breaks it for them as they go. Then you got Alabama and Texas A&M, a game where this line moved really, really low down to like 1, basically a pick 'em at one point as Alabama travels to the 12th man. At A&M. They end up pulling it off 26-20. Tight game, really good game too there. Alabama continues to improve as weeks go on, but Texas A&M kind of surprising me because they really don't look as bad as I thought that they were going to look this season. The question is, will they give up now? Now that they've lost a couple of games, do they continue to fight and think that, you know, we still have a good team, let's continue to prove that, or do they look and think that their chances are now completely gone and stop fighting and stop playing for a Jimbo Fisher team over there? UCLA upsets Washington State 25-17. That's the reason they are now ranked in the 18th spot. Wyoming upsetting Fresno State 24-19. Again, some big games this weekend. UAB popping South Florida 56-35. I say that because we had to play them earlier in the season. Colorado State barely escaping Arizona State 27-24 in a last-minute field goal. Texas Tech beats Baylor 39-14. Clemson squeaking by Wake Forest 17-12. And then Florida beats Vanderbilt 38-14. They get the revenge after last week. So some really big games this weekend, some huge matchups. I'll put up the worst outing of my life in my weekly picks this week. My goodness, I need to retire, quit, just try to hope it can't get any worse than this. Or either next week I'm picking the easiest games there are to pick, because I had the worst week I think I've ever had in my weekly picks. I go 1 for 5 this week. Georgia over Kentucky, yay, we got that. I took Texas A&M over Alabama, didn't happen. I took not only Notre Dame over Louisville, but give me the points 2 and 6.5, neither of which happened because Louisville won this game. And then I also took Texas. I thought Texas, after beating them 49-0 last year, could do something similar this year. Didn't happen. So I took Texas and the -5. Squat, nothing, awful. Lost them both, 1 and 5. That now takes me under 500 on the season, 18-21-1. So hope that maybe some of you out there decided, let's go completely against what this guy says and let's see what happens, you'd have had a nice 5-1 season or 5-1 week, and that might have paid you $1 or $2. But if you went with me, man, I'm sorry, that was a terrible week. But it's a good time for me to put like a disclaimer across the bottom of the screen here that says, please do not listen to what I'm saying in this. It's just something fun to do throughout the year. But anyways, I digress. Some of the fun games that we got coming up this week, Missouri and Kentucky, that's going to be a big one. Again, those were two undefeated teams last week coming into this week, both now with a loss. Let's see who can kind of avenge that and find themselves in better state. That one is going to be at Kentucky. You got Auburn at LSU. Auburn put up some fight last week. They had the bye week coming into this week where LSU had to travel to Missouri. Let's see what happens in this one. Does Auburn have fight on the road at LSU? Indiana at Michigan could be one of the first tests for Michigan. Luckily, it is at the house. Miami at North Carolina. North Carolina looks really good. Miami coming off of a reeling loss to Georgia Tech at the end of this one. UCLA and Oregon State, another ranked matchup. Ohio State heading to Purdue. I'm just going to say don't sleep on it, mainly just because at Purdue sometimes can be kind of like Georgia at Auburn. It just has a little bit more moxie to it than it should. They're liable to walk into it and roll, but just don't sleep on it. A&M at Tennessee, that one, I think that's going to be a really good matchup this weekend. Cal at Utah, Arizona at Washington State, Syracuse at Florida State, Arkansas at Alabama. Not necessarily a big matchup, but Arkansas sometimes can be that thorn in the side. They're on a real bad slide right now, like 4-game losing streak there at Arkansas, so they really need some kind of turnaround. Don't think it's going to happen against Alabama, especially being at Alabama, but they have been known to kind of be that thorn in the side. Probably the game of the week is Oregon at Washington. That's 7 and 8 facing off against each other there. That's where you get to determine who's really the team out of the Pac-12 right here that's going to be able to fight for this side of the ball. And this is liable. And not that USC won't, but offensively they're good. Defensively, not so much. Let's see, is it going to be Washington and Oregon? Who is that really going to be the team to kind of represent out of the Pac-12 there? You got Louisville at Pitt, Southern Cal. This is a big one, USC and Notre Dame. Like I said, Notre Dame coming off of a couple losses now. Are they going to lay down and just give up for the rest of the season? Or are they going to try to fight? This is a good opportunity to do that against a USC team like we just talked about, who defensively I think Notre Dame can slow them, possibly win this game. But the biggest thing about it is they have to be able to score too in this one. Then you get NC State at Duke later on in the night too. So some more big matchups coming this weekend. I'm excited about it. I'm fired up to see Georgia play against a Vanderbilt team that should be well overmatched. I would like to see, can Georgia continue what they did in this first game, or not this first game, in this first half of this game against Kentucky this week, where they haven't looked that way. They haven't looked that way all season, 34-7 at the half. You know, that's not what Georgia has been all season. But then to continue that in the second half and really not sleep through any of the rest of the game. Very, very big for Georgia. Glad to see it. So we're going to wrap that up right here with the review episode. I'll be looking forward to getting back with you guys later on in the week as we preview the Vandy game that we've got coming up. Make sure you guys follow us on all of the socials. If you guys want to support the show, patreon.com/Dawg Talk. I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, we will check in with you guys later on in the week. Go Dogs.